Hogstyle.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Hogside. This is your host, Alex Z's here with you. I got Steve on the mic as well. Steve, I hope you're having a good week, or you had a good week at work.
It was an incredibly busy week at work.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's over. Yeah, it was a nightmare in the practice of law this week, but that's okay.
I had a busier than expected. I had a week where I came in Monday or Tuesday. There was nothing on the schedule. And then like 8 things popped up, like per webcasts and things that I have to do.
Well, I'll give you an example for me about how bad it was. So there was twice this week when I had a conference call in the morning, and then one of those people called me back in the afternoon and said, "You remember what we talked about?" And I said, "That was yesterday, right?" It's like it had been such an awful day that
Sure.
I thought this morning was the morning before, because that's the kind of week I had. It was a federal holiday on Monday. On top of that, it was really only a 4-day week, and it seemed like it was an 8-day week.
Yeah, 4-day week this week. I felt like a 5-day week. I actually on Friday I said, "Man, I don't know about these 5-day work weeks." And the new kid I hired, he's like, "We had Monday off, man."
Yeah, that was I understand.
Yeah. Hey, we got another 4-day week coming up though with the 4th of July, so that's something.
Yeah, and that's on a Monday, is it not?
That is a Monday, yes. So we get 4-day, 5-day, 4-day.
When the 4th of July is on a Saturday, that's the worst, because I've always had to work on Monday after that.
Right. Well, so now that you are in a government-ish position, the way it works, if it's on a Saturday, you get Friday off. If it's on a Sunday, you get Monday.
Oh, is that what it is? That's the
yes.
federal. I mean, I'm with the city.
But I'm assuming municipalities follow that same.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we'd probably get the Monday, but yeah, regardless, there'd be a day off. But like in a private law firm,
right? They don't care.
I've also worked through many holidays. I think the only holiday I've not worked on is Christmas Day, and I think I worked from home on Christmas Day.
Yeah,
we don't. It's
I
like there is not
saying that how bad they were about that.
This is how bad it is in a private law firm. There is not a vacation policy.
Right.
They don't exist. You don't have vested vacation days at all. They're the only real holidays, like day off there truly is Christmas.
Yeah.
And maybe Memorial Day, depends on where you are. Beyond that, you're working through all of them. I've worked many Thanksgivings.
Yeah.
It's pretty awful. Yeah.
I mean, if I were to pick, you were to tell me I only get one holiday off, I would want Thanksgiving. Personally.
Well, you're Mr. Foodie. I mean, I get it.
Well,
and you're not just that. Either.
It's a food and like big family holiday.
But you're also not Christian. I mean, so Christmas has a meaning for you, but it's not the same as what it would be for me.
I actually got offered a job at a place. I mentioned it to you. The only holiday they were giving off was Christmas, and I was like, "That's useless for me. Can I swap it?" And they're like, "No."
There's also like 15 Jewish holidays that I can't pronounce any of the names of them.
Yeah, but only 3 really matter. Like,
but the more devout Jews are like gone half the year with holidays.
Oh yeah. The Orthodox Jews, they take every other day off basically.
Because I listen to Ben Shapiro's podcast, a lot, and like at lunch and on the way home and stuff. And that dude is always off.
Sure.
Because it's always like some different Jewish holiday. It's the Sabbat and this and that, or
Well, Shabbat is every Friday. That's just the.
I mean, I'm making the words up. I knew, but.
Yeah.
But he's, I think, an Orthodox Jew, and so for him, it's and I respect that. But it's like, man, I wish I could have. He's
probably conservative, not because Orthodox is the outfits usually.
He wears a yarmulke.
Well, no, the yarmulke is not the outfit.
I think he calls himself an Orthodox Jew.
Does he have a big long beard? Then I don't consider.
No.
Yeah, then I don't know if I count him. In that.
I don't know, but I know he's very religious. Is my point.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Why don't we get into the show, Steve? I feel like honestly, we're gonna want to talk about the Roger Goodell stuff a lot, and that whole rigmarole, everything.
Roger Goodell do something this week?
Yeah. Well, no, he didn't do anything. That's kind of the point.
So Roger Goodell appeared before the Senate or House committee.
Yeah, the House committee
this week. Yeah. I watched, so you guys don't have to. I watched the entire 2.5-hour hearing split up over Thursday and Friday night.
Because it's 2.5 hours. That's a lot.
Well, yeah, I ran out of time, and it was live during the day, and I can't do that during the day. But I did watch the whole thing from start to finish. It's on the PBS NewsHour YouTube channel if you want to torture yourself.
Right.
And listen, I mean, it's congressmen, so it's stupid and useful is no way to go through life because it's Congress, and Congress is stupid and useless.
A lot of wasted time there.
A
Yeah.
ton of wasted time. None of these people are very smart. They're below average intellect. They're selfish. The entire purpose of the hearing is just posturing
Right.
anyway. And as I've said many times, I was glad to see, because I've said on the show for months that this hearing shouldn't exist, or this committee shouldn't exist. It's an inappropriate use of congressional resource. About 5 or 6 congressmen, I didn't know who any of them were. And Jim Jordan, I knew, he's a Republican, but beyond that, I didn't know who any of them were. And about 5 or 6 of them said this committee is useless and shouldn't happen. So I was glad to see someone who's on my side. But in terms of accepting that it happened, at least an hour of it was just congressional posturing.
Oh,
a lot of them weren't even talking about the issue, and it's
Right.
just pointless.
So I believe the rules are you get 5 minutes for a
Yes,
question.
they went 5 minutes for every
Right.
person on this committee.
Which, by the way, if you want to say, I hate Robert's Rules of Order, the old timey documents we use for all this stuff. 5 minutes was great 100,000 years ago. That was enough time for one question. We need 10 seconds.
Yeah, but 10 seconds would be better, because half of them didn't even ask Goodell a question. They were just
exactly.
And half of them weren't talking about anything related to the subject of the hearing. That shouldn't have happened. It was inappropriate. But in terms of Roger Goodell, so what did Roger Goodell say? I can summarize it by saying he said absolutely nothing that we didn't know or that was remotely interesting. Roger Goodell ought to be a politician. He is very, very skilled at the art of babbling about nothing.
And he has no spine, which is, great for politicians these days.
He did have a little spine. When these congressmen tried to talk over him, he did tell them to be quiet a couple times.
Yeah.
Which is good.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, a couple times. I don't know if you watched the whole thing or not.
I didn't watch the whole thing. I saw clips and stuff like that.
There were a couple times when he said, are you going to let me talk or not? You going to let me answer? And they'd go, oh, I'm sorry. And then they'd keep talking because they're congressmen and they're rude. And by the way, Rashida Tlaib, what a rude, horrible, awful person she is. My God. Just the rudest person in the whole building that day. Terrible. But so what did Goodell say?
She likes to attack. That's her thing.
She's a horrible human being. She's just a bad person. She's a racist and everything else.
Well, I mean, would you rather that, or would you rather Jim Jordan, who's been accused of covering up 50 sexual assaults?
Jim Jordan is pretty smart, and he wasn't rude.
I mean, he was pretty rude. His questions were nonsensical.
And he made a long statement, and also. But
again, he's covered up more sexual assaults than Dan Snyder.
Yeah, but you're on the other side of me, and I mean, I get it. And so
he belongs in jail.
People I hate. Rashida Tlaib is a racist and an anti-Semite and doesn't belong in Congress. Anyway, so what did Goodell say? Not a lot of anything when it came to Washington. He did pretty much what I thought he would do, which is not throw Dan Snyder under the bus.
Not directly.
No, I mean, he didn't say anything more than what the NFL's already said.
Right.
And he defended the NFL's investigations. He admitted what was already in the NFL's summary memo they released and what the NFL's already said, which is Redskins culture was bad and evil and bad, and they shouldn't have done an investigation on their own.
And they're trying to fix it and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of nothing, to be perfectly honest. The whole thing was a lot of nothing.
Yeah, in terms of what was, nothing new came out from him.
No.
I think they tried to press him on, can we get a copy of whatever the Wilkinson report was? And he was like, well, there is none. So he stuck his guns there, not surprisingly. Yes. Because if, at this point, even if there is, you've got to lie. You've got to stick to the lie. Because if you don't stick to the lie, it's a bigger problem.
Well, it's not a lie. I mean, there isn't a report that isn't covered by attorney-client privilege. Now, they could have instructed her to write one, and they didn't. But he's not wrong in saying there isn't a report that I can release.
Right. I'm assuming that's the truth.
Although, for the record, by the way, in terms of attorney-client privilege, the privilege doesn't belong to the attorney. The privilege belongs to the client. So the client could release the whole file if he wanted to. And it's kind of like a backwards catch-22 excuse they're using a little bit.
Sure. And I understand that. The other thing that, if we are pressed on, he's like, I don't have the power to fire Dan Snyder or get rid of Dan Snyder.
He's
Like, yeah,
accurate.
yeah. I mean, none of this is news
No.
in that regard. I did think it was way more interesting how after he was done, they released a whole bunch, a few hundred. It was what, 180 pages or
Well, I
so.
didn't read. I couldn't find that, and I also ran out of time to read it.
Right.
I read there. I don't know where it's published. I couldn't find it anywhere. Like last night, and I would have
Yeah.
only
I
had a
think it
chance to
was
blow
the
through it
House
anyway.
has it on their website.
Maybe, but I
Yeah.
would have only had a chance to blow through it anyway. But I did read the 27-page memo from this stupid committee. It's just,
The memo. Yeah, there was the memo, but they released all
yeah,
their
I know they
interviews and
did.
stuff, which were way
Yeah,
more interesting.
yeah. The memo said nothing interesting. Not a lot new. The story about Snyder pouring milk into somebody's sweet was new, which
Yeah.
is like Dan Snyder has no character at all, and
Yeah,
so
that came from his former chief operations officer,
yeah.
who was ordered to pour milk in the owner of the Nationals suite to make the carpet stink. Which
And it's just ridiculous. I mean, what a
that's the kind
child.
of thing a middle schooler does. Like,
Yes,
you
child.
know, yeah,
Yes, child. And
yeah.
it's just he's just. I mean, but newsflash: Dan Snyder's a terrible
Well,
human being.
the
I mean,
the
we knew
other thing
that.
from that, I don't know how much of did you get to see any other stuff from that whole testimony, the
I
David
watched
Plotkin
the
thing?
I watched the 2.5 hour hearing.
But that didn't have him in it, did it? That was all
Did Snyder?
Goodell.
No,
No, no, no, no. David, that didn't
it
have the
didn't have
CO.
anybody but Goodell and a couple
Right,
clips.
right, right.
So I didn't. I've watched zero of that
I
hearing. I
don't
didn't watch
think
any of it.
this one was broadcast. I think this was just a Q&A session.
Yeah, I didn't watch. I haven't.
Yeah. So the more interesting ones to me about his testimony, talking about a number of times where he would be with Dan Snyder, like on the road, and Snyder asking him for $500 in the middle of the night, assuming it's for prostitution.
I mean, let's be unfair though. It could have been for meth.
Yeah,
He
that's
could have
true.
been trying to buy cocaine from a guy on the street corner, not necessarily hookers.
Right. I mean, $500 can have a lot of fun purposes at 11:30 at night when you're staying in a high-end
No, it's
hotel.
not any good purpose, but
No.
it does not necessarily just hookers. He could have been buying drugs as well.
Right. Or hey, you know what? He could have gone to 50-50, $250 prostitute and
Yeah, a
$250 worth of
mixture of
drugs.
both. I don't know what. I mean, I've never hired a hooker, so I don't know what you can get for $250.
I don't know what you get for $500 either. Yeah, I have no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah. Neither of us are into that sort of thing, so I don't know if it's like some gal with one tooth or it's Julia
No, that
Roberts or
so
what.
I can't tell a funny story where my wife and I were once walking down the street in DC, one like in the middle of the day, and we were on a street that had some prostitutes, and some dude pulls up to the one-tooth prostitute and says $5 for a blowjob, basically.
Uh-huh.
And my wife overhears it, and she says, "Hey, you're shortchanging her. That's worth at least 15." And the guy's like, all right, 15. And the girl looks at my wife's like, thanks. And just goes on her way with the guy.
Okay, so if that is any guide,
Yes.
and I've never been, it's always been a dream of mine to be approached by a prostitute, and I never have. And to be honest, I don't know if
maybe rephrase that one.
it's a joke. I'm kidding. It's but I don't know if honestly I would even recognize a prostitute, to be honest with you.
Oh,
Rather over someone who's some just scummy person standing on a corner. But if that is any guide, then $500 would buy him some high-end escort.
I would say
Dan
probably
Snyder's not going to
mid-tier
pick up a
would be my
one-tooth
guess.
chick on the
Yeah.
street corner,
Yeah, I'm guessing 500 gets you a nice mid-tier prostitute these days.
But what is a mid-tier prostitute though?
They
I don't know.
They don't look like they're on the meth themselves.
See, I would also guess, take a stab at this. I would assume the high-end ones are like on escort sites, websites. I would assume, right?
I would assume those are higher end. Yeah, I would assume the highest end aren't even on those sites.
They're probably on no site. They're probably
you
just
are
have to
handed
know
a phone number by a clandestine thing and
Right.
make that call.
Now, the easiest thing, and plenty of congressmen have done this, is just pick up some chick on the corner like that.
Oh yeah.
And so, but I just can't believe Dan Snyder would do that.
No.
He's too arrogant for that. I mean, he'd want the high end one.
I mean, he's a billionaire.
Yeah.
Like you don't become a billionaire and then risk that being a transvestite prostitute or something you weren't expecting. Like.
Yeah, but does any of this surprise anybody? It doesn't surprise me at all.
No.
I mean, yeah, he's married, but come on.
Right. There was another story in there, equally funny about I don't have the name in front of me. Norm Chad, was that it? That was a guy
Yeah,
for the
Norman Chad.
Norman. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He was out in I think Italy partying with Dan on a yacht. Not the current yacht, but I
Talking
think
about the media member, right? There was a Norman Chad who was a media member, I
Oh no,
thought.
no, I'm
That's what
talking
I'm
about
talking.
somebody else then.
Oh,
It
then
was
no,
another
I don't
like
know.
CFO type.
Oh, yeah, that may be the name, but no, I was not who I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
thinking
So
of.
they're out partying. This guy apparently went to Dan Snyder at the party because there were a lot of women and everyone was getting a little too wild for him. And he said something about it to Dan, and Dan kicked him off the yacht and told him to fly himself home to DC. Which, not a crime, but just what a shitty thing to do to a person.
Yeah, I mean, but again, I mean, Dan Snyder is a bad person. He's
Right,
just not a good human being.
right.
He and Rashida Tlaib ought to have a baby. Um, none of this surprises me. I mean, part of the fundamental problem with the Redskins organization, no matter what who he wants, he can blame Bruce Allen all he wants, but he was
Hmm.
the owner. He was the one encouraging things like drinking in the office during the day.
Right.
The abuse of women in women and female employees in the office. He's the one
Hmm.
who would punish the woman but not the man when there was an inappropriate affair in the office.
Yeah, there were a couple stories that came out this week about
He's
him
the
doing that.
one who tried to steer cheerleaders to his limousine.
Right.
He's the one who not only, I don't blame him for trying to do dossiers of the accusers because I'd probably do it too, but I definitely blame him for sending PIs to their house. That's
Uh,
way
yeah.
inappropriate.
Yeah.
I mean, would I do a makeup kind of the basics of, okay, this accuser is this person? Sure, probably. But sending PIs, and that's straight out of some bad movie, you know?
Especially guys you're paying them to be confrontational. You're not
Yes,
even
the
paying them
point is
to.
to intimidate. It's to
Yeah.
intimidate when you send a PI with a gun and a trench coat to their average
Right.
woman's home.
And
I mean,
another
they're
dude
going to
named
think,
Knuckles with him.
yeah, they're
You know.
going to think they're going to get assaulted. Not, you're not there for any good reason.
Right.
It's a horrible. That part was horrible, but it's also very expected from a dude like Dan Snyder. And
Yeah.
please, still credentials for training camp.
Yeah. So there were stories that came out. I mean, you did kind of mention this. One of the female executives for the team apparently was having an affair with a coach. It sounds like at one point.
And they told her
Uh,
to stay away from the coach.
no, they just fired the executive. They fired her. They didn't even
And when
tell.
they told everybody to stay away from the coach, basically.
Right, right. There was
Not like
another.
pull the coach in and say, stay away, you need to straighten up or ship out. No, it's,
No, no. They did that with a woman who was sexually harassed by a coach during the Spurrier administration, because it was 2002 that they. And by the way, it does blow the whole this was just Bruce problem out of the water.
it
That half
does.
these stories are from like 2000 to 2010.
Now, I can't honestly, speaking of this topic, blame them too much. Chris Cooley was mentioned in this. Chris
Yeah,
Cooley married a cheerleader and apparently had an affair with another one. Now, many teams have fired many cheerleaders and
right,
kept that. Like Kobe Bryant had this happen with the Lakers. One day there was a rumor about he was having an affair with a cheerleader, and then like the next week, this cheerleader was mysteriously gone.
hmm
It's not just and I'm not saying that's right. What I'm saying is that's not just a Washington thing.
Oh
That
no,
part.
no. And I
And they're always going
actually
to choose the highly paid player over the cheerleader.
I also and it gets into a larger question in a way. A whole lot of our culture has had a stereotype of the high school quarterback dating the top cheerleader. Like that
Yes.
has been a trope in America forever.
But
Why?
more than that, though, Alex, is
Yeah,
that you have a bunch of alpha males
right.
who
And a
who
bunch of
are
hot women.
also who are used to getting every woman they want because they're athletes, and
Right,
then you have a stable of beautiful cheerleaders
right,
literally across the hall.
right.
And so that's just it. That is going to happen.
No, I understand that, and I'm not excusing it or justifying. And by the way,
Oh,
I
it's
think
not
Chris
right.
Cooley, his marriage with what was her name, Christy? I can't remember,
I don't know. I don't
but it
remember.
lasted like 15 years. It was
It was a legitimate relationship,
yeah,
but she should, if that's going to happen, the most companies would have a policy you need to disclose it,
right.
and I may ask one of them to resign,
Which is what they did in his case.
Well,
Yeah.
I think they fired her, not she didn't resign. I think they told her to
Okay.
go away.
Sure.
you know. And because he's making millions and she's making nothing,
Right.
she left.
He was basically the face of the franchise
for a while. Yeah.
at a point. Yeah.
He's persona
I mean, it
non
was
grata in the
him,
building
Moss,
now.
and Clinton, but
I always thought that Cooley was one of the better analysts and stuff they had, and they just threw him out the door unceremoniously.
well, and I think it's because they knew that this kind of
He was
stuff
part of that culture.
Yeah. I don't think he did anything worse. At least there's no
He's
record of
not
it.
mentioned of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm sure that's part of what happened. Is they're like,
Yeah.
we gotta, like, you can quietly leave, Chris, but you
I
have
guess
to leave.
if you want a macro level view of all this, so the macro level view of the hearing is that it was pointless. Nothing came out of it interesting whatsoever.
No,
And
I was very
probably
disappointed in the hearing, honestly.
75% of it was just stupid politicians grandstanding and babbling to make themselves look good. That's the macro of that. And the macro of the all these interviews and the summary that they put out. Newsflash, Dan Snyder's a bad guy. There were some funny stories that came out, that the ones we've talked about, and there were a couple others, but none of it was anything that we didn't either know or expected. All of this stuff are things that we've all assumed Dan Snyder's done, and so none of it should surprise any of us whatsoever. That's the truth of the matter. And so, I mean, what's going to happen from here is the next question. Is has the NFL changed their mind out of because of all these things? Don't know. Is Congress going to do something? I certainly hope not. Considering what it is, but my guess is that Congress is just they're just going to bleat a little more, and then it's going to go away. And whatever bills they're proposing will probably not pass, and then that's it.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what the NFL's next steps will be in this. I feel like there probably aren't any for them. I think in their mind, they're done. We do know that the committee is talking about still trying to get Dan Snyder to come up here. We'll see if they actually do a subpoena and if that does anything.
Well, yeah, let me stop you right there because that chairperson Maloney said at the bitter end that they were going to subpoena Snyder. Right. Now, what is the difference between that and what already happened? So they invited Goodell and invited Snyder. Snyder declined, as per what I said last week. If there's a subpoena, that comes with a contempt of Congress charge if you ignore it. So Snyder will appear in one way, shape, or fashion. If they, and there's a difference between her saying it and them actually doing it, of course.
Sure. And contempt of Congress, by the way,
is a felony that Roger Clemens went to trial over. No.
Isn't it?
No. Roger Clemens got charged with a felony for contempt of Congress and lying to Congress and had to go to trial over it. And my sort of friend Rusty Hardin is the one that got him off.
Oh, okay.
But it could be a big deal. I mean, they don't have to charge him, but they could.
Right.
And it is a felony.
I thought there was a $10,000 fine type thing with it.
Well, there's a difference between contempt of Congress and contempt of court, where you won't, where you stand up and yell in a courtroom and they find you in contempt. That's not even necessarily a criminal charge. If you in the Smith County, Arkansas District Court, there's a huge difference between that and contempt of Congress.
Oh, sure. I mean, Congress is Congress. That's a bigger deal.
But yeah, I mean, it's a felony.
Okay. By the way, if Dan Snyder does go to Congress, I think we all assume he'll just plead the fifth on everything, right? Like,
no, I mean, no, I don't think so.
Anything serious, at least.
Well, so the fifth, what Alex is talking about for those of the uninitiated is the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution says you don't have to testify against yourself if you're going to implicate yourself in a crime.
Right.
And so if you haul Ted Kaczynski into court, who's dead now, thankfully. But if you hauled Ted into court and said, talk to us about all the people you killed, he could plead the fifth.
Correct.
And so you're not supposed to abuse that. And so if they say, okay, Dan, give us some background. When did you buy the team and this and that? And he goes, I plead the fifth. You could end up getting yourself in trouble over that. So
Right.
what he ought to do is, if they ask him directly, which they will, if they could shut up and ask a real question. See, they need to let Jim Jordan ask all the questions. He's the only one there who could ask it, who was intelligent enough to ask real questions. And there was one Democrat who did too. There were two of them. But anyway, if they say, okay, talk to us about the time in which you felt up a cheerleader under the table, he might plead the fifth to that.
Right. Now,
But I
when I
would think
said,
it'd be in limited uses.
yeah, I didn't mean literally everything. I meant like he would have a guy sitting next to him saying, "Don't talk about that." And
Probably,
I
you know,
just put
but
my hand over my mic, so you might not have heard that.
yeah, no, I saw it, what Alex did.
Yeah.
But part of it, there's, I think, a delicate balance to that, because people who plead the fifth, it comes with, it's not supposed to, but it comes with kind of a implicit air of guilt a little bit
Right.
when
Well,
you do that.
it's kind of the same thing as if you pay off, like what Deshaun Watson's done, paying off a bunch of the people accusing you of sexual assault. There, it isn't supposed to necessarily come with an admission of guilt, but most of the public looks at that as an admission of guilt.
And I've written many, many, many settlement agreements, and every one of them I've put in a confidentiality provision. And we've argued about it sometimes, because I remember one of them, um, on the other side was a big deal, high profile plaintiff's attorney, and he wanted to be able to brag about the settlements. We had to argue about that. And,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up concluding they could say the number, but not who it was, and, that kind of thing. And so it
Sure.
goes back and forth. But like a Deshaun Watson thing, when you've got a guy worth tens of millions of dollars, it's going to be hush money. You will not breathe a word of this at all. Now, where that ends is court subpoenas.
Mm-hmm.
Usually these type of confidentiality provisions have provisions that say, if you're subpoenaed by a court or other lawful legal authority, you can testify, but you have to give us notice as soon as possible, or within
Mm-hmm.
X amount of time. So these women hypothetically could have a confidentiality agreement and then still have to testify before Congress. That could
Right.
be the case, because they
Well,
can't bar them from testifying in front of Congress,
but I
realistically.
was also my point was more that pleading the fifth is kind of looked at the same as settling a lot of these
By
things.
the
Where
unknowing public, yes.
yes, by the generally the public does
Because
not say, oh, that means everyone's fine.
yeah, because when I litigated, I also settled cases by parties who didn't do anything and weren't.
Hmm.
I didn't do when I did criminal law. It was in law school for a year and a half. But um, when I was litigating as an attorney, as I was not a plaintiff's attorney, I was a defense attorney. But we settled a lot of cases where it'd be just like the insurance company wants to settle, and who cares what you think? We're going to
Right.
settle it, or just they just got tired of it, and we'll just pay them off and we're done. It was very few people that really stood up all the way to the end.
Right.
So
Well,
that's
also
just the
let's
way
be honest,
settlements are.
settlements are the number one thing that happen anyway, right? Like
Oh,
with
by
most,
far,
yeah,
yeah. I'm at 99.9% of cases
yeah,
don't go to trial.
right, right. Now, there's some. I feel like that number should change for certain issues, but
Well, like Deshaun Watson's case was never; those cases were never going to go to trial.
right,
I said day one that he ought to settle it immediately, because I knew he would.
right,
Because what you can't have is either 24 separate trials or 24 women lined up in a courtroom with
hmm,
all with different attorneys, or but all questioning Deshaun,
right,
for hours on end. That would not go well for him. And he's probably not very smart, and it probably wouldn't do well. And I knew that was never going to happen. So there was never anything but settlement in his future. And I mean, I'm sad to say, but I think Rusty probably just wanted to get his pound of flesh out of the cases before he settled them.
Oh yeah. Well, in his case, there's still four that are still at trial.
Now,
That's
let me talk about that real
well,
fast.
yeah,
So I read
but
all these pleadings,
yeah,
and there were 3 or 4 of them that were a lot worse.
hmm,
They all were about the same, except 3 or 4 were a lot worse, and they were like alleging things that were really felony sexual
yeah,
assault.
right.
And the DA didn't charge him because there was no physical evidence, but that was what they were alleging. So my guess is that those are the 4 that he probably wasn't able to settle.
Sure. And you know, just in general, about that topic, very few sexual assault trials happen anyway, or very few things involving that world. I think I just saw something because it's been a big issue of late. Only 2% of sexual assaults even ever end up in a courtroom. Roughly speaking, it's about 2%.
Well,
So
as bad as the Me Too movement was, or the believe all women and all that stuff, because what they were really saying was you have to believe everybody, which is also stupid. But what it's born out of is not a bad thing. What it was born out of is that women are afraid to come forward with this for a variety of reasons, which are beyond the scope of the hogsty. And the
right,
idea of creating a culture where people aren't afraid to come out and talk about it is a good thing. Believe all
sure,
women is stupid, but that's there's a line to it, and that's what you're talking about. So 2%, yeah, I don't know, I wouldn't swear to the number, but that doesn't surprise me.
yeah, it was at the time 2/3 never even report it, and then of the third that's left, only about 2%
And
ever
especially
end up
let's
with
and let's
conviction.
multiply that by 10 when you're talking about a billionaire in the building, like
Yeah,
and a vindictive asshole like Dan Snyder.
yeah.
Excuse
To
my
bring it back,
language.
yeah,
Yeah. When you're talking about a vindictive, petty, evil monster like Dan Snyder, I
right,
mean, it's no wonder they were afraid. And just think of the courage of the people who went to the Washington Post,
yeah,
not even anonymously. There were a few handful of those women, like 4 or 5 of them, that went to the Post and did on the record interviews about it. I
yeah.
have a lot of respect for that.
So
That's
the
not
last thing we should
just,
mention with this whole
yeah.
story, because it did come out finally, the news about the whole airline uh, incident with Dan.
Go
The
ahead.
the woman, I mean, there weren't a whole. It's still not a whole lot of details, but we all knew about the what was it, 2009?
It
Someone
wasn't an
said
airline; it was a private jet.
private jet,
Yeah.
yeah, airplane.
I
Sorry,
can summarize this. So
yeah,
what the allegation is, and it came out in all these hearings, and this was a new one. There was a woman who has alleged that Dan Snyder took her back to the private bedroom in a private jet
right,
and did some degree of sexual misconduct back there, and like in that he tried to take her clothes off and tried to get her to sleep with him, and then she basically said no and left.
right.
um, and it hadn't ever come out before now, and the witnesses were a bit unclear because a lot of them said she looked fine and not upset.
Hmm.
But that is the story.
Right, and that was something that was settled for 1.5 million or so,
Yeah.
1.6 maybe. We all knew about the settlement. We all knew something had happened, but
That
it
was the story that we knew he settled a case and we
right,
didn't know why. And it turns out that is the case.
right. It There had been a lot of rumors that this is roughly what had happened, so it wasn't a bombshell, but it's now finally been reported that this is what happened. So I would think, well, first off, I'm assuming his wife has known about all this the whole time. I would be shocked.
Doesn't it make you wonder why she would stay? And I know the answer.
Yeah, yeah.
The answer
We
is
all know the
money.
answer.
The answer is money.
Right.
And there's probably a prenup
Yeah.
that is probably skewed very heavily towards Snyder because he
Right.
just wouldn't marry her if she wouldn't sign it. But I mean, yeah,
He was already rich when they met. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, he was. And, how does a short, petty jerk get a model? Well,
yeah.
when you have $1 billion, that's how.
Sure. Doesn't hurt.
No, it doesn't
Uh,
even mean, I mean, who knows what their real relationship is like? What I do know is it's probably not as it appears to the public.
well, do you think someone who's that miserable in life is happy in relationships?
No,
Just
he's probably worse
yeah. Yeah.
because he
That's
doesn't
kind of my
probably doesn't
thinking
hold
too.
back when the cameras are off.
Yeah. Well, we all try and hold back a little while the cameras are off in life.
Well, remember, you're not a
Yeah.
narcissistic billionaire, though.
Yeah,
You're
I
just
know.
a narcissistic poor guy.
Yeah, exactly. Narcissistic $100,000 or whatever it would be. Whatever my net worth
I
is
think
really.
I'm the only narcissist here. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
Not quite 1 million if you add in like my house costs and stuff like that.
You may be in the positive if you add in the value of the house.
Oh, I'm in the positive on everything. I have no major debts other than my mortgage, so I'm good there. But, it's
Alex
not
doesn't.
Dan's
Alex
not.
is a is a city living lefty, so he doesn't even have a car that's that's any expensive or anything.
Yeah, well, it's paid off, is what it is. I don't understand these people who's like when they pay off their car, they go buy a new car and lose money on it. Like cars are losing propositions.
If people were smart, what they would do is save the money, pay cash,
Right.
and then immediately start saving more money. And then when you have enough or your car runs out, you can then pay cash again.
And just keep running a car till it dies, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know people.
What
A
kind
lot
of
of
car do
people
you
hate
have?
that. So.
Didn't you just
Uh,
buy a new one?
well, my
Did you?
wife bought one
Okay.
because she has to drive further now. So we have
Oh,
two.
okay.
We're now a 2-car house.
Oh, wow. 2-car household.
Yeah.
What a change.
Yes. For
Anyway,
us, it
so
is.
to get back to Washington, so I guess the last thing here is anything different going to happen? I mentioned this earlier.
Yeah.
Um,
The answer is no.
the answer is no. Let's talk about options. So, what the public, because the public is naive, thinks is that the NFL is just going to vote Snyder out. Number one, it's not that easy.
Right.
Number two, that is setting a precedent that they don't want to set because there are other owners who are just as much scumbags
Mm-hmm.
as Snyder. They just hide it better. Snyder's just dumb enough to get caught. So they don't want to set a precedent of, when you feel up at the secretary in the private bedroom of your jet, you're going to get voted out because then all of them would be voted out. So I think at most what will happen, I do think the NFL is getting tired of him.
Oh, sure.
I think at most what will happen, and this would be acceptable to Washington fans, is that somebody's going to come to him, Jerry Jones, Bob Kraft,
Right.
the Maras, some other influential owner, and go, time's up, son.
Yep.
You got to go. We're going to make your life miserable. Just sell it and leave. And if Snyder is an evil narcissist, which he is, he may argue about it. But at some point, he's going to realize he can make $5 billion in cash.
So, Steve, you want to hear my wild theory? I think
Okay.
that's already been told to Dan, and he's
It
just
might have
sticking
been.
around.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah.
It might have been.
I think that discussion has happened. He gave them all the bird, and one of the reasons
they'll make his life miserable enough that he may
Right.
do it at some point.
I mean, there's no way that it was a coincidence that that story just came out, right? Like, you know what I mean?
No, there are no coincidences and stuff like that. Chris Larry on IJB had it exactly right. He said that he guessed that it was Washington that was leaking the Gruden emails.
Right.
And he's probably right. There's no evidence of it, but I mean, there's a game being played with all this stuff right now.
When you list who had them and how they get out there, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It only makes sense.
But look, I mean, if Donald Sterling eventually got the hint, Dan will eventually get the hint too.
Right. The last thing I'll say about consequences. If the NFL didn't vote out the Dolphins owner when they found out like all the stuff this offseason that they were doing,
and he was, if people remember, what he was doing was basically fixing games,
right,
telling his team to lose.
Yeah. If they're not getting rid of him, they're not getting rid of Snyder for off the field stuff.
So, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you.
Now, do I believe both should be gone? Yes. I think both have probably done enough where they should be out of there. But
the problem kind of at a human level is that, because I've been around at least one of them, and this guy didn't appear to be like Snyder, don't get me wrong, for those of you who know who I'm talking about, but
yeah,
these people have so many yes men around them, and there's so many of their staff are just terrified of saying something that is contrary to what these people believe or want to hear.
Right.
Yes, man. It's kind of like being a famous rock star. Everybody around you wants something. It's the same sort of psychological event. I mean, if you're like, I don't know, Prince, I'm making a name up, but you have, generally speaking, people around you who either want money or want you to recognize them and want to be in your orbit. And that is what it's like to be a billionaire. And you multiply that by bad character like Snyder has.
Right.
You don't have an air of truthfulness and honesty. You have the opposite.
Sure. No, there's no one there to slap you and say, Dan, you need to help help yourself and fix this.
Even his wife isn't going to do it because his
Right.
wife was around him when he was a billionaire. And then I don't know their relationship, but if I had to guess, I'd say that was probably a factor.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it is. Yeah. I
So is
don't see.
Snyder going to go or no? What do you think? And if
I,
yes, when?
I don't think it'll be anytime soon. Um, my guess is it'll be if it happens. The real thing that will make it happen, if anything, in the near future, will be if the stadium stuff continues to fall through for him. I think if he can't even get a stadium built, that might be enough for the NFL to actually pressure him out because
Yeah.
the league would not be happy if he tried to move, for one thing.
Yeah, they would be very unhappy because,
Yeah,
I mean, as bad as the team is and all that,
yeah,
they don't want the team to leave Washington out of recognition of the fact they've been here 90 years.
right. And it's the nation's capital, and
All
it's
of that. Yeah.
probably if not the biggest. It's not the biggest market population wise, but wealth wise, it's in the top 3 to 5.
Well, it's just a prominent location
Yeah,
more than
exactly.
that. I mean, I don't know about wealth and who knows, but yeah, no, I agree. I don't think the league would want them to leave. I mean, we know the man has ruined the fan base and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
He basically drove me away for a variety of reasons, and I don't think I would ever come back. But most people will probably would come back.
If he left, yeah,
Yes, I
yeah,
wouldn't because the Redskins are gone.
right.
Um,
And I definitely understand the people who are like that, who feel like this is just not their team
but
anymore,
I
no
don't
matter
think it's
what.
a ton of people. I think there are
No.
some, but I think I'm in a minority. But I think a lot of people who are mad would be unmad if Dan left.
So, you know how there was that poll that came out that said only about 30% of DC supports the team now?
Yes.
I think the reasoning is it's a lot of different minority groups that have left. Some people left like you because partly the name and all that stuff.
It's a
But
combination of all
yeah,
of it
yeah.
because I really,
It's not
really
just one thing.
despise the treatment of women like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think some people, it probably was that part that made them as their number one reason. There's people who left because they just didn't like, I don't know, the way that the team handled RG3. You know,
Also, I mean, the team doesn't win ever, and people
right.
get tired of that.
Yeah, yeah. But I bet you like I would be very interested to see a study done of why did people leave and like break down what categories everything's in. You know what I mean? Because there's probably 30 different reasons that people would use.
We could put a hogstye poll out, but we just have the sycophants who are on Twitter, so it
Right.
wouldn't be accurate.
Right. And they're the ones who are still left, not the ones who have left.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. So
Yeah.
it would be, the sycophants are the ones that are on
Right.
Twitter. So
Right. That'd be a tough one, man. Or that'd be an interesting one to read.
you'd have to do a real study to get that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Not
also the
an
media
online.
studies aren't any better than, they're just a bunch of, anecdotal people on the street. You'd have to like hire a firm to do a real study.
Yeah, an actual polling firm,
Right. Yeah.
and that costs thousands of dollars.
And
So I'm not
nobody's
doing
going
it.
to do that.
Yeah. Yes. If I were a millionaire, I might just start randomly doing polls like that just because I'm bored and weird.
A
But I'm not a millionaire.
lot of millionaires need something to do.
Yeah. If you're a millionaire out there and you want some weird polls, we have ideas.
Come to
So
us. We can give you
yeah,
some.
yeah, yes. We can spend your money, not ours. Never ours. All right, why don't we flip and talk about the safeties real quick because
Okay.
that we do have to do position group today, and we are doing free and strong safety, smaller group, so this will go quickly, which is nice. There's 5 guys here that I see. Let's start
I
with
have
the
6,
6.
depending on
Oh
how
yeah,
you
yeah,
count
you're right.
Troy Apke.
Right, Troy Apke, who I don't know what he is. You know,
He's a man who's lucky to be on a professional football
he's a
team.
special boy, is what he is. Let's start with the starters. Bobby McCain, Cam Curl. Curl, I think, quickly became a fan favorite. Probably still, he might be that low key fan favorite right now on this whole team.
People love the
Uh,
underdog,
yeah,
and
if you
that's
if you
Cam
love a
Curl.
little underdog
Yeah.
fan favorite character, that's who it is, right? He's
I,
7th round pick.
yeah,
You know?
7th round pick out of Arkansas. That's an underdog automatically in the
Yeah,
NFL.
yeah, and he came in, really played well that rookie year. Played well last year too. Um, it's interesting to me that he's been more of a strong safety than a free safety, because it felt like when you looked at, and I remember we talked about it when he got drafted, that his play style was more deep. Like he was a deep safety more than a strong safety type.
I think curl. See, there's a when you say free safety,
Mm-hmm.
it depends on what um, coverage system they're playing. So,
Sure.
like a cover two, for those of you who don't know, is two safeties back covering back halves.
Right.
Okay,
They
and
split the
then
field in half. And yeah.
yeah, and then the corners are underneath in the flats, and then the linebackers have the shallow middle.
Right.
And so there's not really a free strong safety in that kind of setup.
No.
Like a cover one is going to be like that's when there's one deep safety, and that's like Sean Taylor, a guy
Right.
who can cover everything, all of that.
Right.
Um,
That's what a true free safety is in my
yes,
mind still.
like one like cover three,
Yeah.
there's two safeties on the field, but the other one is kind of a pretend linebacker like Landon Collins. And
Exactly.
so what I think Cam Curl's probably I don't think he has the speed and the range to be a true single back free safety.
No.
But I
No.
think he's a pretty decent cover two safety. He has the ability to cover half the field,
Right.
and he could probably be a strong safety, up in the box if he had to.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with him too. And it's an interesting way to kind of start looking at safeties more, not free safety, strong safety, because I think those ideas are kind of antiquated. But where are they best playing zone? Is it the cover two system, a cover three? If you remember going back 2 years to Curl's rookie season, their best defenses were when they were playing quarters, basically, which is two safeties back deep along with the two cornerbacks all playing a zone, a four-person zone in the
I don't
back.
think they do it enough.
They don't do it enough at all, no. But that's where Curl really was
Well, they're
great.
trying to get an extra person in the box. I mean, that's
Right,
why they're doing it the other
right.
way. But I mean, I think that's a better coverage system.
It is. I think Curl. I bet you he'd be a very good free safety in a cover three. Playing that middle field.
I
I
don't know
think he
about
could do
that.
it.
I don't know if I agree with you there.
No.
I mean, we can agree to disagree. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's really the best thing for him.
Yeah.
And I'm
Well,
judging him by the
by what
standard
we've
of
seen.
Sean Taylor too. And so that's not nobody's Sean
Right.
Taylor except a handful of Hall of Famers. But
Right. Right. But I don't know what does Kroll really need to do this season though. Does he need to step up his game much? I mean, he's definitely an above average
I think
safety.
the real question is what's his ceiling and how does he
Sure.
get there? Because that's really sort of what you're saying. And so
Yeah.
Curl has already outplayed his draft status or outplayed
Right.
all reasonable expectations
Well,
by
look,
anybody
being a
but the
starter
Curl
period
family. Yeah, by anybody
outplaces.
but the Curl family.
Yeah.
So can he take the next step and become a player that is a Pro Bowl level player? I hope so.
Yeah.
Don't know. Okay, I don't know how to answer that, but
Yeah.
that's the
I
real
don't know.
question.
I'll put it in an even better way, Steve. Is it okay if he's never quite that player and just a average to above average safety for the next 6 years?
Of course. I mean,
Yeah.
I did this study was it last off season. I went through the every round of every draft
Right.
for because I was just a nerd like this, and it took a long time. It's over 4 parts and
Right.
took
Right. I
like
remember
6
it.
weeks to do it. I went through every draft pick of every team in the NFL over the last 20 years.
Hmm.
And what I found was once you get past like round like 3 or 4,
Hmm.
the odds drop off dramatically. By the time it wasn't even worthwhile. When I got to round 7, it was I'm just trying to figure out who succeeded rather than who
Right.
failed because the numbers are so small,
Right.
and
Because
so
it's
they
like 5% success rate or something.
not even that much. It was microscopically small, and so the idea that Curl beat those odds already is
Right.
amazing. So can he become a Pro Bowler? I mean, it's also hard when you're on a bad team like Washington because you don't, with a small fan base and all that. But
Right.
that's the question for him. I think he's got the potential. Does it happen? I don't know.
Right. All right. So on the flip side from Curl, Bobby McCain, brought in last year. I think it's fair to say he struggled early on. Got better as the year went along when he got more familiar with the system. to me, it's interesting. I kind of view Curl and McCain as a very similar type of player in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
I do
Not
too.
identical. I think Curl's a little bit more physical. McCain's a little more rangy. So the idea that if you're going to say free versus strong, McCain playing free versus Curl at the strong does make sense.
Yes.
Uh, but again, let's not pretend this is Sean Taylor and Laurent Landry here.
It's not at all.
Yeah.
No.
In terms of playing style, they are very similar players. They're both better in coverage than I think they are against the run. They are both decent speed. They can get back in the backfield quickly, or not the backfield. They can stay back and keep up with the receivers pretty well. Um, McCain, what do you think of his play last
McCain.
year? Do you agree he
Um,
got better?
I thought he was responsible for a number of the big busts that
Yeah,
Washington had early in the
no
season.
question.
And so that was on him. I do think that he got better as the season went along, as you said, and we didn't see a lot of those busts after about like the first half of the season. So in that regard, and I think he's a decent professional starter. The team could do worse than Bobby McCain. He's not a Pro Bowler either, nor is he ever going to be there. But I think he's a decent safety. I think you kind of nailed it in terms of what he is. If you have to pick free and strong, he's the
Yep.
free,
Yep.
and Curl is the strong. But I do think he's another guy who's probably better in like a cover two setup,
Yeah.
where they only have half the field to cover, because I don't think he's Sean Taylor either,
No.
or Ed Reed or something like that.
No. And to be fair, there are plenty of single high free safety types who aren't elite players, but they just have speed and range and can do that. Like they don't do it's not a glory position at that point. They're not playmakers, but they can
No.
they can play that don't let yourself get beat mentality. All right, let's move on. I'm gonna say Troy Apke. Glad to see you're still on the team, buddy. All right.
Well, look, no,
Not
don't.
really.
So he's not ever going to be a
No.
significant contributor on defense, but he is on special teams.
Right. He's a
That's why he's
gunner.
still around.
Yep. They love him at gunner for whatever reason. And they're just going to keep giving him vet minimum till they don't want to anymore. That's kind of where he's at. All right, let's talk about the guy who they drafted last year, Derek Forrest, out of Cincinnati. You kind of thought that he was being brought in to take one of these starting jobs eventually, right? Like they picked him pretty high. I think he was a third rounder. Um, didn't play a whole lot last year. Kind of got redshirted. So I don't know what to expect from Derek Forrest this year.
I don't think anybody knows what to expect from
Yeah.
Derek Forrest this
Yeah.
year.
I mean, hopefully he can come in, be a reliever. I think he's a more physical safety from what I remember from his college tape compared to the other guys.
I mean, first of all, he's our 5th round pick out of
Oh,
Cincinnati.
it's fifth round. I thought it was third round.
No.
Okay.
5'11", 200 pounds, which is kind of classic, safety size.
Right.
Again, unless you're Sean Taylor and you're just a freak.
Or
But I don't.
the guy we had last year, whose name Collins.
Landon Collins, yeah.
Yeah. He
Landon
was
Collins
like
is
240.
Yeah, Landon Collins probably should have been linebacker, but
Yeah.
regardless, no, I don't know what to make of Derek Forrest. I mean, I think he's another guy that kind of outplays draft status. I mean, the very few times he was out there, he looked like a player, but he was hurt
Right.
half the year, if I recall. Excuse
Yep.
me, if I recall. But the fact that he could play at all is a win when you're talking about a 5th round pick. But can he be a starter and displace McCain or Curl? Tough to know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely tough to know. All right, let's let's hop to Jeremy Reeves. Been here a couple of years now. I think the biggest highlight of him for him recently was getting a dirty hit in OTAs. That was that big story that ended up getting Ron fined, right? So
Yes.
that's what he's got going on for him. That he's probably in the doghouse a little, I think. Another guy who's really not much more than a special teams player for this team. He was okay on special teams last couple of years, but nothing crazy after that. Can you think of a single, like, he's been here 2 seasons now. I can't think of a single like big Jeremy Reeves play, for example.
Jeremy Reeves actually was originally signed in 2018, believe it or not.
Was he really?
Yeah, he spent a lot of time on the practice squad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that explains some things.
And no, I mean, Reeves is a guy who at times has got some playing time, mostly because of injuries to others. He has gotten on the field. He did
Right.
make his way from the practice squad to the active roster. And so, I mean, I applaud him for that. But I mean, again, this is a case of, can he rise up and become a solid starter? I mean, you have to think that the odds are long. And there's
Right.
plenty of guys like Jeremy Reeves in the NFL
Yeah, exactly.
who, I mean, I think he's got his share of fans as well, just because the fans always love an underdog, and
Sure.
that's who he is, and he's never been a pest. Okay, so Reeves signed with Philadelphia in 2018, waived, and then was practice squad in September 2018, and he bounced around ever since. And yeah, so he bounced around, and he spent most of last year on the practice squad too. I think they might have elevated him maybe. I don't know if he ever left the practice squad other than being elevated, I think. So, I mean, no, you can't expect that he's going to be a contributor, a huge contributor.
No. And then the last guy I have on the list is Percy Butler.
Yeah.
Rookie out of Louisiana. Again, you said it a little bit ago. All our safeties are around the same size. They're all like right in that 6 foot 200 range. We don't have anyone who's, a bigger, beefier guy. Cam Curl's 6'2", so I guess he's a little taller, but that's about it.
I have Curl listed at 6'1". I mean, that doesn't mean I just grabbed that off of wherever, but
yeah. But so they're all in the same range. So
yes.
I don't know much about Butler, to be honest. I don't really, I don't expect much from these guys. It seems like, let's be honest, our depth chart is pretty well set already when it comes to the safeties.
There's no question. I mean, look, I know we're running out of time here. So my roster prediction, obviously Curl, number 1, McCain, number 2,
right.
Derek Forrest, number 3, and Percy Butler's going to make it because he's a draft pick, 4th round draft pick. He's in, and they may keep Apke because of
special teams.
Yeah. And so I gotta think maybe Reeves is either cut or back on the practice squad again.
Yeah.
They're not going to keep 6 safeties.
I honestly, I can't disagree with that kind of analysis. I guess the only real question is Butler or Forrest, who's the primary backup?
I think we have to see him in training camp.
It's not going to be Apke. We know that. They've given up on that. So, the 2 of their draft picks fighting.
I mean, I could make a guess, but it's just a guess. So I really don't know. I mean,
exactly.
we really need to see him play.
Yeah. And I will say the one thing, pulling up Percy Butler's draft thing, he ran a 4.340. So,
that screams free safety.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got some wheels. So maybe that's part of it here.
He's almost as fast as I am.
Steve, 4.3, not 43.
Oh, sorry. Never mind. I thought it was how fast you could walk a 40 yards in.
Right. What 1 pace a second? That's about right.
I have run below 5, but it was, let's just say, some time ago.
Back in your physical prime?
Back in high school.
Yes. Well, that's most people's physical prime is high school or college.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
Unless you're a pro athlete, after college, everything just starts going downhill for a lot of people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yes. All right,
and
guys.
Then it goes downhill even faster once the older you get.
Yep. Every time that first digit changes, that
worse.
hill goes steeper.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, guys. That should wrap us up. I am running late for a funeral, so I got to go. We will talk to you all next week. And later.
Have fun at the funeral.